Te koto te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Te koto nā manahiri. No mai, haere mai ki tene whare karakia a te atua. We welcome you to the space Auckland Unitarians have been making sacred for 118 years. Every little thing that breaks your heart is welcome here. We'll make a space for it, give it due time, and praise for the wanting it represents, the longing for something more, some healing hope that remains not yet. We promise no magic, no making it all better, but offer only this circle of trust, this human community that remembers, though imperfectly, that sings and prays, though sometimes awkwardly, this gathering that loves, though not yet enough. We're still practicing after all, still learning, still in need of help and partners, still becoming able to receive all this beauty, all these gifts we each bring. Come, let us worship together. And afterwards, I invite our guests and visitors to join us for morning tea, our sacrament of hospitality. It is our way of thanking you for honoring us by your presence. Please join us. It won't be complete without you. My opening words are by Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We have inherited a large house, a great world house in which we have to live together, black and white, Eastern and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interest, who, because we can never again live apart, must learn somehow to live with each other in peace. The large house in which we live demands that we transform this worldwide neighborhood into a worldwide family. Together, we must learn to live as brother and sister, or together we will be forced to perish as fools. With humility and courage, born of our history, we are called as Unitarians to build the beloved community where all souls are welcome as blessings and the human family lives whole and reconciled. With this, our hearts and in our hearts and minds, we light our chalice. Well, I see Brian Tamaki of Destiny Church is having another tantrum again about New Zealand being a Christian nation. He objected to Jacinda's call to Muslim prayer before a 2-minute silence to remember the victims of the massacre of worshiping Muslims in Christchurch. He called it an abuse of her prime ministerial powers. 12 years ago, he was ranting on about our being a Christian nation, leading his followers in a march up the steps of Parliament, demanding that Christianity be declared our national religion. Having only recently escaped a growing theocracy in the US, I was moved to perform my first act of voicing my liberal religion in the public square. I wrote an op-ed piece condemning his position that was published in the New Zealand Herald. It's still online. Put Clay Nelson, New Zealand Herald, you'll get it. At that time, I received some support, but considerable vitriol with a sprinkling of death threats. I knew I wasn't in the US anymore when someone in Dunedin called me at home to give me an earful. And this was well before I was notorious due to my billboards stirring the pot around the world, or seeking an end to Bible in schools, enraged the religious right, or my supporting marriage equality angered homophobes, or advocating for a living wage riled neo-capitalists, or taking on my bishop to the Human Rights Review Tribunal for discrimination against a gay candidate for ordination angered my co-religionists, or supporting Indian students being unfairly deported upset white nationalists. My first venture would not be the last time Tamaki and I would cross swords. 5 years ago on Maori TV's Media Take, he and I would again focus on the issue. Sadly, it was a short piece where positions were not adequately explored. So now I have another opportunity to respond to what I consider his attention-getting nonsense. Fortunately, I don't have to say much, Brian, except maybe get a life. Your tired attempt to discount the faith or non-faith of others that don't agree with yours is an effort to divide us as a country, has been answered by hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of New Zealanders standing in vigil at Moss. His views have been buried in flowers of both hope and grief. Sometimes doing public theology only requires 2 minutes of silence. What a difference 12 years makes. What a week it has been. I've never seen anything like it. In the discussion following my reflection last week, it was noted that we as a congregation needed to push for gun control. After the service, this management committee and members of the Peace and Social Justice Committee agreed. They began working on a letter to the government to ban automatic and semi-automatic weapons. Several drafts were proposed, and before they could be finalized, the Prime Minister had announced that legislation had been drafted that would ban such instruments of destruction. Furthermore, the legislation had the support of opposition parties. We are now organizing to send submissions of support in the 3 weeks before a final vote. It's clear that we have been forever changed by last Friday, when far-right columnist Matthew Hooton and conservative national MP Judith the Crusher Collins have nothing but praise for the leadership of our Prime Minister. Now we just have to figure out who we are now and where we want to go. As Unitarians who have a long history of speaking out in the public square for freedom, social justice, and religious tolerance, we have to ask how the landscape has changed. For one thing, the focus has been on radical Islam being the threat to our safety and security. Politicians and pundits have tried to terrify small children with the imminent threat of Sharia law replacing our democratic institutions. The hijab has been described as patriarchal oppression of women. New Zealanders were shocked in the aftermath of this crime against humanity to learn how loose our gun laws were. Almost any moron could get an assault rifle legally, and one did. 10 minutes after it happened, Jacinda told us not anymore. For many, the massacre opened our eyes to the fact that those who we thought were the threat against us were in truth the victims of xenophobia and white supremacy. All of the instances of mass shootings in the U.S. by homegrown terrorists were perpetrated by white men, just as last Friday's was. Few are aware that more Muslims than any other group are killed by terrorists. Just as the first responders to the scene will never be able to unsee the horror they witnessed, may we never be able to unsee how our privilege, biases, ignorance, and fears have blinded us to how they provided fertile ground for such an act. As Unitarians, what is our role in this new New Zealand landscape? While we need to continue to speak out against social justice, we also need to demonstrate the values we hold in how we do it. We need to become more conscious of our own contribution to intolerance. We're mostly a highly privileged group, and we cannot help having absorbed mainstream values that do not readily accept the other amongst us. There are plenty out there who want to play the blame game. We don't have to play. When even mainline politicians attempt to politicize and incite our fears of the other, we don't have to vote for them or give them a platform to divide us, nor do we ignore them. Debates over all of the issues this terrorist act raises need to be had. We need answers for why this attack took place and how to prevent its reoccurrence. And we must address the fact that racism and religious intolerance is a daily reality in New Zealand. But caution is also needed. It's worth taking heed of the warning issued by Kenan Malik, one of Britain's leading left-wing public intellectuals, who wrote immediately in the wake of the Christchurch attacks that the dead deserve better of us than a rush into name-calling and invective. Malik argues that debate and examination is absolutely necessary. The issues raised by the barbarous terror are many and urgent. The rise of the far right and how to combat it, how mainstream commentators talk of Muslims and immigration and whiteness, the boundaries of free speech and the regulation of social media, and so on. I will no doubt have my say on these issues in the coming days. However, he says this does not seem to be occurring in a productive, healthy manner. What has been depressing, though, has been the way that much of the discussion has degenerated into name-calling and invective. The dead of Christchurch have seemingly become a stage on which every contemporary debate, from Brexit to Trump to the politics of identity, is played out. The rawness of anger inevitably clouds judgment. He concludes by saying, to say that the dead deserve better is to say that we should be better in the way we engage with the living, with each other. And we should. Another British commentator, Ma'ajid Nawaz, who is a Muslim and a former parliamentary candidate for the Liberal Democrats, writes in even stronger terms that radical Islamists and radical leftists have seized on the Christchurch tragedy to push their own hateful agendas. Nawaz argues that this type of politicization risks falling into the trap that the terrorists set to create division, chaos, and and to pit the political left against the political right. He also fears the blame game will lead to a shutting down of debate. Nawaz is worth reading at length. In my youth, as an angry 15-year-old Muslim witnessing the Bosnia genocide, I once succumbed to this temptation and promoted extreme Islamism myself for a few years. I know what giving into hate feels like, and I know the lasting damage it can cause. But that is exactly the reaction that extremists want, and exactly why it must be resisted with all our might. So it is with no surprise that I noticed a mere day after 50 of my fellow Muslims were so publicly and tragically killed, while the blood was still wet and the bodies remained unburied, that the ideologues had circled like vultures. Opportunistic Islamists and far-left extremists began calling for a purge of people whose politics they disagree with, and started publishing McCarthyite lists of persona non grata to target. In another column, Nawaz argues, now is not the time to settle political scores. Now is the time to reflect, reach out, and respond with mercy from a position of moral authority. Many think that being prophetic is about looking into a crystal ball and predicting the future. No. It's a reference to the prophets in Hebrew scriptures. All of them were doing public theology. They spoke for justice and against anyone who trampled on it, no matter how high or how low. They called us to live out our values. One of my favorite is Micah, who called on us to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. One of the reasons Jacinda has received accolades from around the globe is she has embodied Micah's entreaty. This is not without irony, as she does not fit into Tamaki's vision of a New Zealander. While she grew up in a Mormon home, she left the church as a young woman because of their stance on the LGBTQI community. She now identifies as an agnostic. However, she has shown us and the world how to do public theology with kindness, compassion, and empathy. My meditation for today is by Thomas Rhodes. Let us enter into a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. Feel the earth beneath your feet as it supports you. Feel the love of this community as it surrounds and enfolds you. Feel your breath as it flows in and out of your body. Listen to your heartbeat. Listen to your heart. And how is it with your heart? Does your heart feel whole, shielded by intellect, cocooned by reason, closed to feeling? Or is it broken, fragile to the touch, brimming with the pain of loss? Or has your heart been broken and healed so many times that it now lies open to the world? Knowing that true growth comes not without pain, that tears may wear down barriers, that we may carry the hearts of others, even when our own heart is too heavy for us to bear. None of us has an unblemished heart, not one. For such perfection can be found only in death, and we who are alive still have much to heal. So let us give thanks for the broken places in our hearts and in our lives. For it is only through such brokenness that we may truly touch one another, and only through touching one another that the world may be healed. Let us give them thanks for the brokenness that we share. My closing words. In a world filled with darkness or ignorance, let us bring the light of reason. In a world filled with darkness of despair, may we share the light of hope. In a world filled with the darkness of hate, let us shine the light of love.